Welcome, and thank you for joining me today. We're going to have a fun little 30 days. This is your 30-day Dental MBA. And the format for this, of course, you could have bought this on VCR, CD, or cassette. Hopefully, a lot of you dentists have a 30-minute drive to work. You know, I figure you could do half of this tape on the way to work, half on the way home. And if you got the VCR tape, it's really going to be good for a luncheon. You know, in any healthcare industry, labor, is your biggest ticket item. And it's very expensive to close the office down for a day and lose $3,000 to $10,000 of production. So what I really recommend here is you just have a series of luncheons. And, you got lunch from 12 to 1. Have the doc spring for a pizza or some sub sandwiches or KFC and bring it in the break room, and we'll knock these out an hour a session. And we're going to be very focused, and I really believe firmly if you go through the entire 30-day program, which is going to be very rare, I expect no more than half of the dental offices to go through all 30 days. But if you do it, if you're hungry enough and you want it, you're going to have all the tools at the end of this 30-day Dental MBA to take your office to any level you want to be. I like to thank my wife and 4 kids for giving up a lot of time with their dad to build this thing. We've been working on it for a long time. And if you're in the car and you're listening to this on CD or cassette, don't worry about if I'm describing something on a slide, because all the slides are in your workbooks, and most of you have seen my lecture before. So just I'll try to be very descriptive of what's on the VCR that you're not seeing on the CD or cassette, but don't worry about it. There is nothing that you would need to see on the VCR that you couldn't just hear in sound on the audio cassette. But basically, we're going to be talking about my today's dental. Of course, I'm a dentist in Phoenix, Arizona, and I'm filming live from Scottsdale, home of Omar Reed and Michael Schuster. And it's a beautiful day in Phoenix, and let's rock and roll. These are the top 10 signs that your dental office really needs to hear my seminar. Number 10, the sign-in sheet on your front counter says sign in, sit down, and shut up. Number 9, your dentist stops during the middle of a root canal and says, I think I better call the psychic hotline. Number 8, you hear your hygienist ask a patient, why would someone as ugly as you want to get their teeth cleaned anyway? Number 7, after every dental appointment, all of your patients swear they will never go an hour without flossing for the rest of their lives. Number 6, your dentist never spits out the Listerine. Number 5, the hometown judge sentenced a convicted murderer to 30 dental cleanings in your office. Number 4, your receptionist answers the phone with, can you please hold, my boyfriend's on the other line. Number 3, you overhear your assistant tell a patient, save your money, your teeth are all going to fall out anyway. Number 2, you often wonder why customers routinely ask if your receptionist lives in a van down by the river. And last but not least, you thought you were going to get off at 5 o'clock, but now you got to stay until dark to drag a dead patient out to the dumpster. If you answered yes to any of those 10, you need to listen up. First of all, in practice management, I think the reason that so many people have a hard time with practice management is because it's delivered almost like a religion or a philosophy or a culture or custom or a taboo. It's delivered dogmatically, where the economic underlyings of the speech has about 1/10 of the weight of the tone of the voice delivering it. And practice management, the father of practice management is Claudius Galenus, or Galen, and he lived in Greece 130 AD, and you'll note that he was a physician and writer on medicine and philosophy, and that's what I really want to stress. All I'm doing here in presenting this information is saying, I'm Howard Farran, I'm a dentist in Phoenix. I've chosen to live in an aquarium and let 161,000 dentists, most of which practice solo, look in on my little aquarium, see what I do. I'm not delivering this in a dogmatic tone saying, this is the world according to Howie and this is what you got to do. If Claudius went by Galen, I'll give you permission to refer to me as numbnuts. I mean, this is simply the what I do, right or wrong. It's 4 to 5 with a lot of information. I got my mastership in the AGD. I got my master's in business administration from Arizona State University. And this is just a serious effort. We're 12 years into my prototype. The average McDonald's does about $1.4 million a year. My dental office does $2.4 million a year. It does $10,000 a day. I'm not trying to say that to impress you. I'm trying to say that to impress upon you that you can do whatever you want to do. And I think with 30 days of material, if you just took a smidgen of notes and implemented 5, 6, or maybe 8 important economic fundamental concepts, you could certainly do whatever you want. The average dentist in the United States has about $330,000 a year. And when I talk to these guys and gals, most of them are doing about 30 a month and want to get to 40. Well, we do 40,000 by the fourth work day of the month. So if your goal is to go from 30 to 40, trust me, I have all the information to get you to do 200 a month. So just relax, take this in. If I'm saying something that offends you, lighten up, relax. Dentists are they're part engineer, they're part doctor, they're part scientist, and extremely anal. Just kind of relax, let your hair down. I let all mine out. And just relax and try to have fun with this. But first, I wanted to start with macroeconomics because I really feel that before you get into the nuts and bolts of microeconomics, of running your actual dental office or Dunkin' Donuts or your family farm, you really have to understand macroeconomics first. And I want to point out that it's the #1 complaint at all of my lectures that I spend too much time on macroeconomics. And I'd also like to point out that those dentists that complain that always have the worst practices. You cannot live in an island and not understand how global economics, especially the United States economy, and how this information transmits to all the people massively affects your business. If everybody that came into Dunkin' Donuts thought that a donut was the cause of catching AIDS, it would slaughter your business. You have to be aware of what the 250 million Americans, 260 million strong, what these people are thinking, how their economic system works as it's played out in politics or whatever, to really understand your microeconomics. And you'll especially need to know macro if you're going to try to make any long-term predictions about where this market's going to be in 5 or 10 years, let alone 20 or 30. First of all, let's talk about the macroeconomics of healthcare. In 1997, 1 out of every $7 in the United States was spent on healthcare. Now, you figure that's $3,830 per person, or 14.2% of the gross domestic product, or the GDP. Now remember, right after World War II, it was only 4%. Now it's 14%. We spend 10% more of all the dollars spent on healthcare than we did just 50 years ago after World War II. Now, you have a lot of commentators and politicians saying that we really need to bring down the cost of healthcare. Well, let's explain that, first of all, when economics was first written up as a science, it wasn't called economics, it was called human action. And human action basically is how never think of the word economics, just think of people. The only 3 fundamentals of economics are people, technology, and the capital stock of machinery and John Deere farms and dental drills. So you just got capital stock of things that apes use to work more. You don't get much wheat out of the field when you're standing behind an oxen plow all day. So a John Deere tractor would be technology, and if you inherited a tractor, that would be capital stock, and then you have people. Try to think of economics as, I like to think of Gilligan's Island. And Gilligan's Island, you're stranded on Gilligan's Island, and you wake up day 1 and you're hungry and you need to eat. So you go fishing. Okay, well, going fishing would be work. You catch fish, and that would be your gross domestic product. You caught 10 fish today, so your GDP would be 10 fish. Now, one day you're fishing, and nothing to do with you, a school of fish comes in, and you catch 100 fish. Okay, so now your economy went up tenfold, and it had nothing to do with anything other than a school of fish. Just like when a huge winter storm hits the Northeast, their gross domestic product will contract for a while. When a hurricane hits Florida, their gross domestic product will contract for a while. So you have people, and they go to work because they have unmet needs, wants, and desires, and they go to work to grow chickens and pigs and trade them for other things that they need, like shoes and houses and what have you. So when you caught those 100 fish, now you don't need to fish for 10 days. So now you're sitting around, and the professor comes out and tells Marianne and Gilligan and Ginger that if they would make a net, that they could probably go back to maybe catching 15 fish a day. Well, that net would be technology. Well, so when we look at Hillary Rodham Clinton, who, if anybody knows me, I'm not too fond of her. It really gripes me when someone who grew up in a law firm who's never spent a day in a hospital walks into the presidency of the United States, and instead of reforming the legal system, which is absolutely a madhouse, which she knows everything about, she decided not to touch that, but to go into the health care and try to reform it. And as you know, her little health care plan, which was bringing it to socialized medicine, cost her husband the Congress in the following election. But people sat there and thought, well, there are problems in healthcare. There are major problems in healthcare. Well, let's talk about what it means when we say that healthcare in 1997 was 14 out of every $100, or $1 trillion out of a $7 trillion economy. Well, first of all, the number one procedure in healthcare, the number one expense is 4 million babies delivered. Now, my wife, Judith, her grandmother, Martha Majerus, is still alive in Caldwell, Kansas. Now, Martha had 5 children, and I want you to tell me, where were her 5 children all delivered? She's 92 years old, and she grew up in Caldwell, Kansas. You guessed it, she delivered 5 babies in her own bed. I talked to her about this. I said, how was that like? And she goes, well, it was tough. You know, Albert was out in the field, and he couldn't stop farming because you can't stop eating to have a baby. He had to farm, and I had to deliver a baby, and usually you spent the day in the bed and delivered the baby, but she says the 5th one was the greatest. And I said, why was that? And she said, well, they had invented the fan, and I had a fan on me the whole day. And she goes, there's nothing more luxurious than to have a fan on you when you're sitting there in bed having a baby all day in the middle of Bumblebutt, Kansas, 100 degrees, 90% humidity. And so why would the number one medical procedure, the number one expense in healthcare, why would it be 4 million babies? Because women today do not want to have their baby in their own bed. Number one, there's not enough hydrogen peroxide to clean the sheets afterwards, but their husband's at work, her husband's never delivered a baby before. You go into a hospital and there's nurses that do this for a full-time job. You got epidurals, you can have narcotics, you can have TLC. You're wiped out. If there's a complication, they're right on top of it. Well, having your baby in a hospital is not an expense. See, that's the problem. And when we're going to talk today, I'm going to point out how millionaires talk and think very differently than the middle class. The poor just flat out don't get it, and I think the poor is always going to be there because since World War II, we've had 14% of Americans live below the poverty line. $6 trillion later and 50 years later, you still have 14% living below the poverty line. So there's always going to be the poor because they're uneducated and they make very low quality decisions. But I want to focus on the difference between the middle class and the rich. Middle class always refer to health care as an expense. Well, is it an expense when you go buy a Garth Brooks CD? Is it an expense when you go to Las Vegas? Is it an expense when you go to Disneyland? How come if a poor state decides, like right now Detroit, one of the richest men in the world is building a multi-$100 million casino in Detroit. And what does the press say? They say, oh, this is great. It's gonna create jobs. It's going to stimulate the economy. It's going to rebuild downtown. It's going to be great. But if you went with that same amount of money and said, we're going to build a neonatal center, they go, oh my gosh, this is expensive and it's going to cost a lot of money. They say, wait a minute, why is a casino an investment that creates jobs, and why is an intensive care neonatal unit an expense? Because the middle class, they don't understand the difference between an expense and investment. Basically, economics is real simple. We're back to Gilligan's Island. You wake up, you have an unmet need, want, or desire. So you go to work to try to earn some currency so that you can buy something to fulfill your unmet needs, wants, and desires. The number one expense in healthcare is 4 million babies delivered. You could deliver every one of those at home. You even have a fan. Hell, you might even have central air, a heater, an air conditioner. Hell, your husband might even take the day off work. But you don't want that. You have an unmet need that says, look, I'm not delivering a baby on my front room floor. I'm going to the hospital. 762 million Americans visited their physician in 1997. Most of them walk in there and you need to go to someone with 8 years to college, and 8 years of college walks in there and says, may I help you? And they go, yes. I have a sniffle. Okay, what do you want me to do? Call the police, NASA, send you to Mars? Well, is there anything you can do? Yeah, here's a Kleenex. Well, can you give me some pills? Well, Alexander Fleming developed the first antibiotic for bacteria in 1936. It's now the year 2000. We still don't have the first antiviral. They're all viruses. And they go, well, can you give me a pill anyway? So you give them antibiotics because, whatever. That's the nature of the game. But 762 million people went to the physician. And if you go back 50 years, if you went back to 1997, I guarantee you 700 million of those 762 million people did not need to go to the physician. But they just had an unmet need, want, and desire to go talk to a doctor that, have you ever, remember when you were making rounds in hospitals and dental school, when you had to do your hospital rotation and, you walk into the room, you sit down, there's grandma and she's, 180 pounds. She hasn't walked a mile in her last 10 years. And you say, may I help you? And she's like, yeah, my knees hurt. And you're standing there thinking, that's because you're fat. You never move. You eat bacon, lose 100 pounds, walk 3 miles a day, and it'll go away. Well, I just want to take a pill. I just want a pill. I'm not going to lose 100 pounds, quit smoking, and go exercise. And it just blows my mind. You walk in there all day long. It's just fat people who never move, who live on bacon, and they can't believe they have arthritis and their back hurts, and then they want to have a baby. They want to go to the doctor. Well, I'm not saying this sarcastically. That's fine. But what I want to say is that healthcare, whenever you have a business where people bring in their pigs and chickens and trade them for cows and horses and John Deere tractors, that's the economy. There is nothing wrong with having 1 out of every $7 in the United States spent on health care if that's what the consumers want. If people want to go to the doctor every time they got snot in their nose, that's fine. It makes no more sense than the same person who wants to go see the Titanic. Someone wants to go see a ship hit an iceberg and then have a love story for 4 hours while it sinks to the bottom. Another lady wants to go to the doctor and ask why she's got mucus in her nose. But all it is trade, okay? There's nothing wrong. And if Hillary Rodham Clinton wants to cut the cost of health care, well, she's a woman. She's had a baby. Why don't she just take the podium and talk and convince 4 million American women to stay home and have their baby on the front room floor? But if she doesn't want to convince them to have their baby on the front room floor, there is no economic way to cut the cost of health care other than rationing it, because that's the only way you can cut the cost of health care, is you have to give out less services. The only way you'll give out less services is if you convince people they don't need it, which is silly because they're going to take their money and go buy a Garth Brooks CD. They're going to go to Las Vegas. They're going to go see the Titanic. They're going to go to Dairy Queen. They're going to go to McDonald's. They're going to spend all their money because they're people. Most Americans spend their entire paycheck before they get their next one. You talk about procedures like coronary artery bypass graft, otherwise known as a cabbage. The average bypass is $40,000. Okay, now people think that you should get the cost of that down to $20,000. Well, my response is, you go buy a brand new Suburban today. Hell, it's $40,000. It's got airbags, anti-lock brakes, 4-wheel drive, gets 9 miles to the gallon. Why do people, when they get a car, want 4-wheel drive, automatic windows, rear window defrost, sunroof, CD, cassette, but then when you go lay on a table, you say, no, I'll just take the Yugo. I mean, think about it. You think $40,000 costs too much for a bypass because you're not getting it on you. Remember Milton Friedman, who won the Nobel Prize in economics and is probably the smartest man that ever walked out of the University of Chicago since Albert Einstein? He said there's 4 ways to spend money, and it starts with the most efficient to the worst efficient. The most efficient way to spend money is when you spend your own money on yourself. The next least efficient way is when you spend your own money on someone else. The next least efficient way is when you spend someone else's money on yourself. And the worst way to spend money is when you're spending other people's money for other people. Well, that's the problem with healthcare. You have your employer spending your money out of your payroll tax deduction, buying insurance from other people for yourself. Hell yes, your employer doesn't want to spend $40,000 for a bypass. If he had the option, John, you got a worker on your assembly line, he smoked 4 packs a day, he's 100 pounds overweight, and he did methamphetamines for 5 years, and now he needs a bypass. How much money do you want to spend on this? And he'd probably say, well, how much is a pizza at Pizza Hut? And they'd say, $5. And you go, fine, $5. But see, the guy laying on the table says, I know I'm a human, and I know that society wants to make us into this human being, but before we're a human being, you're born an animal ape, and animals are animals, and we all have our failures, and we all know we should quit smoking and we can't or don't want to. We know we should quit eating cheese. We like it. Humans are frail. Everybody knows that. And I think society has woken up to that by letting Clinton off lately. And people just realize that some men are going to be like that, especially men who are attracted to politics. But the deal is, this man knows he's not perfect. He knows that he's not a saint, and he knows he did some mistakes, but he wants a second chance. And now he's laying on the table, and he's going to get his sternum cut out of his chest, put on the table, his ribs broken open. They're going to put a 3-foot gash down his leg, take out 3 foot of piping, re-roto-rooter his heart. And when you ask that guy, by the way, when you want your bypass, do you want 4-wheel drive? Do you want CD cassette? Do you want AF, FM, rear window defrost, sunroof? Do you want the deluxe? Or do you want to just save every nickel we've got and do this as cheaply as possible? And when you're laying on the table, Mr. and Mrs. Americans, you're going to want the best gosh darn health care you've ever spent. Now, I told you that health care was $1 trillion. And everybody says that's too much money. Well, in 1997, you spent $600 billion on gambling. So every dollar you spend on health care, you gamble 60 cents. And you go to Las Vegas and Nevada sits around and says, gosh, this is such a profitable industry and we don't have a state tax and we make so much revenue off taxing gambling that we're one of the most vibrant economies. In fact, 3 years in a row, Las Vegas County was the fastest growing county. It's the highest median average household income. They're rocking and rolling with gambling. Well, if healthcare is $1 trillion and gambling was $600 billion, that alone gives clarity to the fact that healthcare is not an expense. It's nothing different than gambling. In fact, when I walked in here this morning, the cameraman reminded me that when he went to my house, my little boy was dressed up as an astronaut. And every time I think that astronaut just hacks me off for 2 reasons. Number one, you spend $1 trillion going to the moon. And what'd you get? A rock. But if I went back to the American people and said, give me $1 trillion and I'll cure AIDS. And you're thinking, well, why do I care about AIDS? I don't have AIDS. It'd be your first antiviral. And as soon as you cure AIDS, you're going to have an antiviral. Well, that will be the common cold. It'll be flus. It'll be half the cancers known to man. And we'll say, well, let's form a NASA. Let's go spend $1 trillion. Let's get a president to stand up there and say, before the decade's over, we are going to have the first antiviral. Alexander Fleming came out with the first antibacterial in 1936, and before the year 2010, we will have the first antiviral, and we're going to spend $1 trillion, and we're going to just pick some city off the map, and it's going to be Cape Canaveral, and instead of going out to the moon, we're going to go down to the level of 5 angstroms, and we're going to find out how to kill a virus. And Americans say, oh, no, that's an expense. We want to go to Mars. We want to go get a red rock this time. The moon rock was gray and dirty and ugly, and we want a red rock. So it's all in your mind. It's like poor people, middle-class people call their house an asset. They say, oh, yeah, my house is a good investment. Rich people say, well, an investment is something that gives you money every month. How much money does your house give you? Oh, I got to shell $50 or $100 into it every month for repair and maintenance and mowing the yard and all that. So let me get this right. The middle class has an asset that every month you have to dump $50, $100 in. And you say the same middle class, say, well, what's your next biggest asset? Oh, my car. Oh, yeah, that's another great one. Instead of flattening it out to about 1 inch thick, you dump $10 a week in that. So rich people call their home a liability, and they call their 401k or their IRA, their stock portfolio, an asset. An asset is something that gives you cash. Middle class call an asset things that you have to shell money into. And this is a thinking issue, and if you don't think clearly, you make low-quality decisions. Healthcare is not an expense. It is a thriving industry. It is 1/7 of your economy, and I'm telling you, the best thing in the world you could help for is that economy grows in double digits because, the United States has been slumping along at 3 to 4% for the last 25 years, and healthcare is growing up. It's the only thing that beats inflation every year. It's the healthiest sector of your economy. Look at sports. Dentistry is a $47 billion a year industry. Okay, well, sports is $152 billion. How come you think Mrs. Jones is standing there at the counter saying, well, I don't have dental insurance and this filling's going to cost $80. She's standing there whining because she eats sugar, she doesn't floss, she's got a cavity, and she doesn't realize that $80 investment in her tooth allows her to keep chewing on it for another 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. And the same lady whining will turn around and take $80 and buy 2 tickets to the Phoenix Suns to go watch a bunch of idiots throw a ball around. So if sports is 3 times bigger in dentistry, I grew up with 5 sisters. I played Barbie dolls till I was 14. I'm still surprised I'm not gay. Now I have 4 boys, every sporting event known to man, hockey, basketball, whatever. And I don't understand sports. Even when they win, I don't even know what the excitement's all about. I mean, one guy threw a ball through a hoop, another guy, whatever. But why do they go spend $152 billion in sports? It's entertainment. It's fun. They want to. They have an unmet need, want, and desire. What is it? Boredom. What do you want to do on Friday night? They have hot dogs, popcorn, beer. Let's go have some fun. It's not an expense. It's the economy. The first people that showed up in North America, we're pretty sure, were Chinese from the Yellow River, the Hai-Wing-Ho River, that migrated over the Bering Strait about 15,000 years ago. Now, when the first Chinese people descended into America, which, by the way, if you look at all the Eskimos, the Aztecs, the Incans, the Native American Indians, the Mayans, the invisible Indian tribes in the Amazon rainforest, they're all Chinese descendants. In fact, what's really neat here in Arizona is if you drive up to the northwest corner, or the northeast corner, you go to the Navajo Indian Reservation, and you get off the roads and you get into the really back roads where it's really, really unpolluted, pure Indian native naturalness, and you just take off your American hat and try to blank out your mind, and you start looking at these people, you realize you're standing on the plateau of Tibet. I mean, these are Chinese people, and when the first Chinese person walked into America, was there an $8 trillion economy? I mean, what is a dollar? I mean, what is a money? It's a growing thing. You create wealth. This goes all the way back to Adam Smith. And the rule number 1 of economics is, first of all, you've got to understand, why does the United States of America have 4 out of every 100 people on the planet, yet last year the global economy was $32 trillion and 8 of it was in the United States. So how did 4 out of 100 people end up with 25 cents of every dollar? I mean, you've got the average household, you got Americans, you got 262 million people living in basically 100 million homes and 300,000 neighborhoods, and the average household income is $38,000 a year. So if you've got an average house doing $38,000 a year, yet you've got 50 countries where the average house is doing under $200 a year, you should first stop and say, why? It can't be genetics. This is the number 1 melting pot where you reflect every country, where you reflect every race, religion. What made America what it is? And every economist will tell you it was the most eeriest thing in the world. In 1776, 2 books were written, and they collided for the first time in human history. You have Benjamin Franklin's Declaration of Independence, which basically gave you free people, and you have Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations, which was free markets. And going all the way back to the Egyptians and the Greeks and the Mesopotamia region, you at times would have free people, at times you would have free markets, but you never had free people hit free markets at the same time, and when they hit, it was an explosion, and this thing blew to the richest country in the world, and it's just nothing but a wealth creation machine. And all economics is I've got an unmet need, want, and desire, and you're going to fulfill it. Look back in 1950. In 1950, the average American ate out 1 in 30 meals. 1995, it was 20. Now go back to 1950 when you went to Grandma's house and it was time for the big meal. Did Grandma take you to the Lone Star or the Outback and get you a bloomin' onion and throw it on her Visa? Or did Grandma actually cook? If I want to hide something from my wife, I put it in the oven, and she won't find it for about 3 months, okay? And Grandma, I mean, even if Grandma did go out to eat, at least she had self-respect. She would park the car, she'd walk in there, and she'd get her food and eat it there or package it up and go back home. You're so damn lazy, you can't even do that. You have to go up to a drive-thru, and you can't even roll down your window. You have to push a button, and then you just like lean your head out and say, if I open my mouth, will you stick a cheeseburger in it? And then you drive off. 38% of Americans are obese. All this is just, you just don't want to cook. Since you don't want to cook and you want to eat out 20 and 30 meals, is this an expense? Should we ask Hillary to try to cut back eating out and try to get rid of 19 out of 30 eating out meals? Do we need a congressional hearing on this stuff? No, everybody just needs to get out of everyone's way and try to act like Milton Friedman said when he wrote his article, America, you ain't no Hong Kong. And Hong Kong gets out of everyone's way. They let people do whatever the hell they want. They only tax 10% of their wealth. And what do? They grow at double digits. They grow at 10 to 12% a year while you're humping along at 3 to 4% because you got too much regulation and you got too much mind pollution where you're trying to make people feel like It's okay to buy your own car, your own house, your own gambling tickets, and your own ride to Disneyland. But when you go to the dentist, you're a victim, and you should really get your employer to pay for your cavity since you're a pig eating sugar who won't floss. So basically, in 1950, you spent 4% of your income on your house. 1995, you spent 10.5%. You spend 1.5 times more on your house than your grandparents did. Have you ever gone to a wedding? I love to go to weddings because, it's like a stupid party that never stops. You got two 20-year-olds walking down the aisle, and they're all smiling, and they think everything's bliss because they have no idea of the hurricane that's about to walk over them in 5 years. And they get done with their marriage, and they go home, and they buy this house, and you walk in there, and you say, numbnuts, come here. Look at your house. Okay, you're 20 years old. You don't have a dime. You don't have a degree. You don't have a job. You hardly have anything. And you have this huge house. Now let's walk over here to your grandparents' house. Your grandpa and grandma have worked for 40 years. Look at your grandpa's pants. His butt's hanging out. He hasn't bought any new clothes in 10 years. Look at his old car. He's got a pension. He spent 40 years with GM. He's going to be collecting Social Security, Medicare, a pension. And this is his little meager house. What the hell are you doing? What did you do? How did you get this big house? Well, the loan officer approved us for this loan. And what are they going to do? They're going to get a 30-year mortgage. Well, in MBA school, what do you call every mortgage over 24 years long? Interest only. I mean, that's why an SBA loan is 24 years, because they figured that out the second time around. So I'm telling you, these people will buy a house that for the first 6 years, say you buy a $100,000 home, 10% interest, 30-year payments. Your payments are $1,000 a month. $950 of that is interest. $50 is principal for the first 6 years. These people are economic idiots, and that's okay. Because when you buy a big house, and you buy a new car, and you eat out 20, 30 meals, guess what? You're going to work your whole frickin' life. And that's okay. Millionaires love that. We need lots of people spending all their money all day long, because if everybody saved their money, the stock market would go to hell because no one would be working. So the deal is, somebody's got to go out there and spend. For every 100 households in the United States, 3.8 out of 100 households are worth $1 million or more. The average Americans that get there are going to be about 56 years old. You'll never guess which occupation has the most millionaires. It's certainly in doctors, dentists, and lawyers, because, can I get some hot coffee in here? And it's funny because doctors, dentists, and lawyers think, well, hell, I'm a doctor, dentist, and lawyer. I need to drive a BMW, and I got to live in the tooty-dooty neighborhood, and I got to buy a Rolex watch, and I got to buy blah, 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 blah. So they never have a dime. Guess what the #1 occupation is for ending up with a millionaire at 57 years old? School teachers. They're well-read, they take a sack lunch, and the average teacher who's a millionaire at 56, 57 years old saves 15% of her after-tax income and just socks it away. And that money starts growing interest, and at 57 years old, she's debt-free, has $1 million, and she was a school teacher who made about $30,000 a year. Then you go up the street, and there's a lawyer, $200,000 a year. He's on his 3rd divorce. He's in a BMW. He's got a Mercedes-Benz, a Rolex watch, goes to Vegas 2 times a year, and at 65 years old, he's barely got a dime. So basically, you guys have the money. It's just, how do you want to spend it? You want to spend on charity, or do you want to spend $1 and $7 on health care? If you fall over with a heart attack, in 1992, you had 3,600,000 people employed in a hospital. Now, I've been to 35 countries. Let me tell you, in most countries, if you had a heart attack, you do not want a doctor. You want a pilot, and you want to get the hell out of that country, okay? I would rather sit there with angina for 6 hours on a plane from Portugal to the United States than walk into the best hospital in Lisbon and have someone pry open my chest. You have 3,600,000 people standing by in an emergency room hospital right now. And you know why? Because you want it. You have a national 911 network. If you fall over, start choking, you call 911. The response time in America is somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes. And there's an ambulance, 2 people on standby, 24 hours a day, 3,600,000 people, because you value your life. So why shouldn't, Steve Forbes said it the best, and I hope that guy becomes a president one day, and I know he won't, because, the race will be run on who's tall, dark, and handsome, not who's short, fat, and bald. You see Forbes. I mean, hell, he looks like a geek. When he smiles, you want to slap him, but he's smarter than hell. He says, why shouldn't the growing demand for health care by an aging population be considered a plus for the economy, a boon for providers, instead of a burden? Is it a crisis when people buy more cars, clothes, software, or overpriced coffee? In 1987, the annual total expense per American hospital bed was $183,000 a year. Now let me tell you something about socialized medicine. All they implement is an old economic theory called queuing theory. Queuing theory is what you call line theory. And if you want to cut that $183,000 a bed in half, what you do is you sit there, and instead of having a bed on standby, which is called capacity, and what we mean by capacity is the reason McDonald's has 40% of the hamburger market is because every 3 miles in your downtown urban area there's a McDonald's. Now, if you were driving down the street and you couldn't find a McDonald's, and only 1 out of every 100 hamburgers being made today were made at a McDonald's, McDonald's could only have 1% of the market. Ray Kroc said, if you want to get 50% of the hamburger business, put up 50% of the hamburger stores. Thomas Watson Jr. knew it before that. Thomas Watson Jr. said, you know, everybody's talking about overhead investment and all this. And Thomas Watson is so clear. I mean, he's the guy who just told, I mean, what was his 3 rules of business success? He says, when you open up your business, you just stop, close your eyes, and you visualize, how is this company going to look like when I'm 65 years old and going to retire? What could I dream of this company to be in the very end? And then, number 2, if that was how your company was going to be 40 years from now, how would you start acting like today? The number 3, start acting like that. All you got to do is visualize, think how you would act it, and you're going to grow your empire. And that son of a gun was so genius, he only had 1 criteria of how to get IBM to be number 1. He said, nobody understands computers. And the people who think they understand computers are listening to a salesman. He said, I'll get 89% of the market. You know how I'll get 89% of the market? Because 89% of the computer salesmen in this world are going to work for IBM. And as long as 89 out of every 100 computer salesmen work for IBM, IBM will get 89% of the market. There went my tongue. That was about 14 million degrees. But so basically, what we need to do, back to capacity, is with queuing theory, is if we went from having hospital beds, 50% of them open on standby, waiting for you to choke to death or keel over on a piece of bacon caught in your lung, or a heart attack, or a car accident, having a bed open. If you just go to queuing theory, which they've done in all socialized countries, where you have to wait 6 weeks to get whatever it is, now you run your beds 100% of capacity. So you have no standby. Well, when you have no standby at $183,000 a bed, if half your beds are empty on any given minute, and now all those beds are full, you just cut the $183,000 in half, which would be, you know, some $91,500. So Americans' hospitals are so much more expensive because they have capacity. And Henry Ford's genius insight in 1917, when he started the Ford Motor Company, was he said that on an assembly line, that you build an assembly line so that the capacity of your assembly line equals the demand of the people. Okay, well, what people don't understand is that's for industry. Industry is anything that if you make it, you can drop it on your foot and say, ow. A service, you don't have inventory. You can't store it in a warehouse. You can't build extra bypasses and put them in a parking lot or put them in a warehouse. Ray Kroc was the one whose genius insight in about 1951 with McDonald's is he says that when you're dealing with a service, you don't build an assembly line capacity to meet demand. You build your capacity to match the flow, because people come in and out, just like a restaurant. A restaurant will be full at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It'll be empty between breakfast and lunch, between lunch and dinner, and from dinner to the next breakfast. An assembly line would have half the tables always filled 24 hours a day, and if they make eggs and bacon when you're not there, they just would store it in a warehouse, and then when you came back later to buy it, you would get it. Well, in a service industry, you have to match your flow. You have to have your capacity match the flow. The flow comes in waves. That's why we see in dentistry just a couple of very interesting observations in dentistry. If I divided the dental offices in America, 161,000 dentists and about 136,000 offices, if I divided them and say I want everybody to get in 2 groups. One group is a dental office that has all their chairs full every day at least once. That's an assembly line, no capacity. Then I want everybody to stand on the right side who can go 2 out of every 3 days with an empty dental chair. I divide those people, I average up all their incomes. The persons that have a dental chair that no one ever sat in 2 out of every 3 days on the aggregate nets $70,000 a year more net income than the group that has all their chairs going once a day. Why? Because when you're in assembly line where all your dental chairs are filled up and Mrs. Jones is in there getting a cleaning and you tell her she has a cavity and she says, gee, doctor, is there any way you can fill that today? And you say, no, I'm sorry, all of our chairs are filled, so no, I can't accept your money today. I'm too busy doing fillings for a lower price than to have any open capacity to even offer you the chance to get it done today for $1 more. And so capacity is everything about expenditures, it's everything about a growing economy. And the minute your receptionist starts telling people who phone in, no, I'm sorry, I can't take your money today, you'll have to wait a couple days to come give us money. Now take that behavior and go to any other business. When's the last time that you've, if you walk onto a car lot, you could buy a $40,000 car right now. You could go buy a $150,000 2-seat Mercedes-Benz 5-stack CD in the trunk within 30 minutes. You could go buy a Suburban, a new car. You got to think about what you can't buy today in America. You get into a movie, unless it's just, a Friday night opening. You could get into, hell, you could have a hooker and a pizza delivered in 30 minutes in this country. You can get anything you want in 30 minutes or less, except for a medical or dental appointment, where you've got to wait 2 or 3 weeks and stand in line while the doctors try to learn a little bit about economics. So the United States health expenditures as a percent of the gross national product is basically 14.2%. The next highest is Canada. The only reason Canada is the next highest at 9.6% is because they're getting a lot of free enterprise pollution in the minds of their people, because their people, Canada is exactly economically the same as Canada. They both have 30 million people. They both have the same number of dentists. They're basically, Canada is just a big California laying up to the north. 90% of their population lives within 100 miles of the U.S. border, and their people are always telling their socialist doctors, well, in America, you can get a cataract removed today. You can get a bypass done today. Why do I have to wait 6 weeks? So their government's under tremendous pressure to be a socialized medicine while having the service. So that's why of all the socialist countries, they have the highest expenditures. One of the highest, that is. Switzerland's 9.7%. France is 9.8% of GDP. Netherlands 8.8%. Germany's 10.4%. They're the second richest country in the world, and rich people want healthcare services. Australia's 8.6%. Australia, Italy's 7.7%. It goes on and on and on. But the United States is number one. And it's funny, people say, well, that's bad, we're number one. And I'll say, well, why don't you, what's your goal, to be Bangladesh? They spend less than 1%. Is that really what you want? You want to get down to 1%? Why is it a bad thing that you spend 50% of all military expenditures in the world are spent in the United States? You got nuclear-powered submarines. You got 25,000 nuclear warheads. You got, look at this last Iraqi war. You killed 100,000 people, and you lost 24. And if I say, well, God, being number one in military expenditures, that's real bad. You go, no, that's real good. If we don't like the president of Nicaragua, we go arrest him and throw him in a jail in Miami. And so it's you want to be number one. It's like when an insurance company calls you up and says, hey, there's something wrong. You've done more cleanings than anybody else in this city. That's bad. You say, well, that's bad. Thank you for informing me that I won the gold medal in cleanings. I'm awfully proud of the fact that I provided more optimum oral health cleaning services than any other dentist in my neighborhood. And I'm not going to buy into that's bad. I'm going to buy into that's good. And will you do me a favor, Mr. Insurance Company? If I fall to second or third, will you please call me up and tell me who's first and second so I can drive by their dental office and learn what they're doing and find out why more people want to get their teeth cleaned in that office than mine? So don't buy into the fact that hospital use expenditure is bad. Don't buy into the fact that we have a lot more hospital beds, that we have a lot more hospital admissions, that people are staying shorter lengths in hospitals as doctors become more efficient. You know, in 1995, when we look at causes of death, we see that in 1995, your top 3 causes of death are heart disease, cancer, and cerebral vascular disease. But go back to 1930. Gosh, it was diphtheria, tuberculosis, and diarrhea. People just don't understand where we've been, where we come from. You still have 50 countries where 1 in every 5 children will die before the age of 5 years old because they drink dirty water. And you go to these countries, you know when the child died of diarrhea because you got this beautiful brown-skinned, brown-eyed, brown-haired baby laying there, and they've got 2 or 3 inches of beet red intestine, colon, hanging out of their rear end. And they drank so much dirty water and their diarrhea was so bad that they literally crapped their own colon out and died of dehydration. Well, what did America do? We put city water in there and we chlorinated it. Dirty water was the 3rd leading cause of death in 1920. And now, how many people do you know in your family that died of diarrhea? Okay? Well, the neatest thing about traveling around the world today is you can literally go back 500 years in time. Oh, I mean, go to Bangladesh. Go walk around Albania. Go to Tanzania. I mean, Tanzania is, it depends on whose list you're reading, but Tanzania and Bangladesh, they battle out every year for who's going to be last. It'd kind of be like the United States every year. Arkansas and Mississippi get in a fight to see who's going to be last in education spending, income, or number 1 in unemployment. Well, the Mississippi, Arkansas of the world is Bangladesh, Tanzania. The 10 poorest countries in the world are all in Africa, and you can walk over there and you can see what happens when you start thinking that clean chlorinated water is an expense instead of investment. How much GDP output is this 3-year-old baby going to produce and consume when he dies of diarrhea at 3 years old? Healthcare is number 1 in America. You go all around the world, and rich people, when they get sick and they've got bucks, where do they go? I mean, think of, where did the Shah of Iran get a bypass? Texas. Dr. DeBakey. The guy had $1 billion. He wasn't going to get a bypass in Iraq. What billionaire would get a bypass in Jordan? Everyone comes to the United States if they can, and they dream about going to the United States and getting a facelift or a bypass or a tummy tuck or a boob job or get all their teeth fixed up. You should be proud. When people say healthcare is growing at twice the rate of inflation, you should say, damn good, because I'm here in Arizona. When Intel grows at 4 times the rate of the United States economy, everyone claps. Everybody in Arizona walks around, they talk about Andy Grove like he's a god and walks on water, because he is. And his industry is kicking butt, and so is your industry. And the only people that are telling you it's bad is the government, because they are taking other people's money and spending it for health care with other people, and they don't want to do that. And sure, they don't want to do that. I don't want to spend my money on your root canal. I'd rather spend my money on my own root canal. The most frequent occurring surgeries are births, reproductive organ procedures, cardiac catheterizations, and back surgeries. Now look at that list and go back to Gilligan's Island. It's because Mary Ann or Ginger, which I think every man in the world has spent thousands of hours wondering if he had the choice, would it be Ginger or Mary Ann? And since I found my wife in a trailer in Caldwich, Kansas, and I'd have to go with Mary Ann and or Ginger or whatever. No, Mary Ann, that's the girl that looks like she grew up in a trailer. And so you sit there and you look at that. Go back to Gilligan's Island. It's a birth. Ginger and Mary Ann don't want to have the baby in the hut. They want to go to the hospital. Why do they have a reproductive organ? Because maybe one of them can't have a baby. She really wants a baby. Why do you have a cardiac catheterization? Because you're eating high-fat foods. Why do you have a back surgery? Because you don't exercise. Healthcare is primarily doctors going to school for 10 to 12 years to help you over your human frailties of overeating, urges to have babies, and lack of disciplined exercise. And that's all healthcare is, just fulfilling unmet needs, wants, and desires. And if every mother who delivered her baby left the hospital only 1 day instead of 2, the savings would be 5 million fewer hospital days nationwide, or roughly $6 billion in savings. That's the only way you're going to cut costs in healthcare, is you got to have people consume less healthcare. And they're either going to do it voluntarily, or they're going to do it because doctors get a lot of technology. I mean, look at how a bypass, where that lays you up for a few weeks, is being replaced by a catheterization where they go up through the vein in your arm or through your leg. And technology is going to get people in and out of the hospital faster. Faster is more efficient. Efficiency is lower cost. And that is also a macroeconomic fundamental misbelief in healthcare. When you go listen to most practice management speakers, they're always talking about, well, this is a better filling, a better root canal, a better dental procedure, so thus you should charge more for it. That is exactly the opposite of all free enterprise. All free enterprise, the product debuts, You have your first computer, it's $3 million, it's 3 stories high, and every time they improve it, they come out with faster, cheaper, and better. In fact, what are the only 3 business strategies you can do? The only 3 business strategies you can chase. Best product, best service, best price. Now, you take an industry like Intel or GM or whatever, they have to simultaneously chase all 3. They have to get you the best product for the best service for the best price, even though it is metaphysically impossible to have the best product and the best price. Look at cars. Okay, the number 1 selling car in the world is a Ford Escort. The number 1 selling car in the United States is a Ford Taurus. Look at General Motors. You have a Chevy. For more money, you have a Pontiac. For more money, you have an Oldsmobile. For more money, you have a Buick. For more money, you have a Cadillac. Well, you can't deliver a Cadillac for the price of a Chevy. Okay, you can't have the best product and the best service. But if you take within a market segment, say we're just talking about Cadillacs. Cadillacs compete against a Lexus, an Infiniti, a Mercedes-Benz. Look at Mercedes-Benz now. What's the price of Mercedes-Benz? You know, you go back when I got out of dental school, the average Benz was $60,000, $70,000. Well, here it is 10 years later. What's the average price of a Benz today? Between $30,000 or $40,000. Why? Because every time the engineers go back to work to make a better car, a better root canal, to make it faster, it always comes out less expensive. When you used to do root canals in 3 one-hour appointments, you did it with hand files. Well, there's 3,600 endodontists in the world, and 3,200 of them use these Tulsa Dental products, Thermofill, not the Thermofill obturator so much as the 300 RPM NiTi, where instead of hand filing for 1 or 2 hours, you go in there with these 300 RPM, get the engine-driven electric with perfect torque, because air-driven, the torque's weird, and you snap files. They're only one use. Don't be autoclaving these things tight ass. They're only $5 a file. You're getting $500 for a root canal. Don't get cheap, because then you're going to autoclave it. You're going to reuse it. You're on an air-driven. You hit the rheostat. The brittle file breaks. You know, they're single use. They're only $5. If you use I use a 6-pack on each one. There's 6 of them from a size 25 to a 40, and 25 to 30, 35, 40. I guess I never really used the 25 or the 20. But anyway, long story short, now that this doesn't take 2 one-hour appointments, and I can take all 3 canals from the minute I get the first file to the end, say with a 6 file, just feeling the end of the canal, to roto-root it out to a 40, takes me maybe 5-10 minutes a tooth. Okay, well, now that I've gone from 2 one-hour appointments to 10 minutes, I mean, my gosh, shouldn't the price of a root canal come down? But you'll go back to the lecture and you'll say, well, since you're using this $5 file, jack the price of your root canal up. That's, as you chase the best product, as you chase technology, the price will come down. Heart, lung, and liver transplants average $100,000. That's the only thing the media focuses on. They're saying, well, why are they doing a liver transplant for $100,000? But see, the media always hypes up rare stuff. There's only 9,000 of these procedures done a year, heart, lung, and liver transplants. You got 250 million people that made 764 million appointments, and the media focuses in on 9,000 operations. That's not the cost of healthcare. It's babies. It's reproductive organ stuff. It's back surgery. It's cardiac catheterization. It's a well-known fact that demand creates the market. You didn't know you needed a hula hoop when you were 10 years old until you sat some guy in the front yard looking like a nuthead, and me and my 5 sisters would go out there and hula hoop. And when you create a product, if it's neat or if it has any fulfilling attribute of needs, wants, and desires, it creates its own market. So you couldn't sell a root canal before you invented a root canal. So basically, healthcare expense is basically 1% of the population accounts for 30% of the healthcare expenses. As of the last figures I got on this was in 1987. By the way, a lot of these facts I get, there are 2 fundamental books written you have to read. One is just the mother of all healthcare economists in the world, Regina Hertzlinger, PhD economist from Harvard University. She wrote a book, Market-Driven Healthcare. Go to Barnes & Noble and get Market-Driven Healthcare and get Health Against Wealth. Too many dentists are always reading these Tom Clancy deals, and they're going to see the Titanic, and most of these dentists, all they put is garbage in their head. I would much rather read Market-Driven Healthcare if I'm going to work in the healthcare industry than go see the Titanic and watch Jack chase Rose around for 4 hours while the cold water takes him over. It's like a Daniel Steele love story. Who reads this stuff? So the deal is, read PhD economists, because the thing about people like Regina Hertzlinger, she's an economist. She's not a government politician. She's not a provider. She's not a patient so much. She puts on her economist hat, and economists are emotionally neutral. They're just telling you the facts. 10% of the United States population accounted for 72% of the healthcare expenses. Now, if you go to a room 500 people and say, raise your hand if you were in the hospital last year, most of the hands that go up are what? Young female staff, and you say, why are you in the hospital? It's all babies. Remember, that's the #1 healthcare, and that alone should make you realize has nothing to do with being a victim. She got pregnant on her own free will. I have a staff member that does my insurance named Mandy. She's had 2 kids. She had both of them in her front room with some midwife. She's this natural herbal aromatherapy, back to earth woman. My wife had all 4 in the hospital. I'm not getting into it. I'm not about to have a 9-pound ape crawl out of my rear end. And if I was, I wouldn't want to stay at home and have it naturally. Look at this Dr. Lamaze stuff they're promoting, try to get down the cost of health care. They're always saying, well, you want to have it naturally, and there's no pain, it's just pressure. I'd like to get Dr. Lamaze in my dental office, put him in the damn chair and say, I'm going to pull all your 4 wisdom teeth naturally. Don't worry, Dr. Lamaze. It's just pressure. Just breathe. Just hold your wife's hand. Just blow. It's just a little tooth. It's just pressure. Don't be a little wimp. Come on, Dr. Lamaze. Blow. Breathe. Breathe. My God, if I was about to have a 9-pound ape crawl out of my rear end, I'd want to be on an epidural, a Demerol pump. I'd want Percodan and a beer. I sure as hell wouldn't want to have it naturally, just like none of your patients want to have their wisdom teeth pulled out naturally. So people go to the hospital because they want to. They can go to the hospital because we're in a rich country and they can afford it. The sickest 3% of policyholders account for 40% of all medical expenditures. And this is my second fun guy, and this is Health Against Wealth from George Anders. And George is a Wall Street Journal. So here's 2 perfect mixes. I mean, you got Regina Hertzlinger, a PhD economist from Harvard, and then you got George Anders from the Wall Street Journal, and somewhere between those 2 people are all the real thinking, proactive, intelligent thoughts about what healthcare is, what it isn't, and where it's going. 73% of healthcare costs comes from 9 diseases: diabetes, infection, hypertension, heart failure, arthritis, osteoporosis, gastrointestinal, asthma, and mental health. And the reason I point that out is because number 9, mental health, and now that everybody's trying to cut costs, you got all these HMOs and all these government people trying to not count mental health. Why is it that if you get an infection in your tooth and need a root canal, you understand that that's a physical problem and you need a root canal? But if someone gets an infection in their head and they get addicted to alcohol or drugs, or they're eating themselves to 400 pounds, or they're schizophrenic, or they're suffering from paranoia, or they wake up in the middle of the night and they're anorexia, they're bulimic, we're still living in a period of time. It's almost like the Salem witchcraft. If we had a drought and we didn't get the wheat out, we blamed it on that woman over there who's kind of weird looking and never got married. And these were mentally ill women, and they were saying weird stuff. So what did everybody do? They gathered around and they hung her. And then they threw her in a gosh darn river. And if she floated, they said, well, she was okay. And if she sunk, they said, see, she was a witch. That we're still there. The year 2000, we're still there treating mental health as some kind of religious illness or evil. I mean, look at David. Who's that guy? David Hinckley. Was that his name? Who's the guy that ate 9 people or 20 people? What was that guy's name? What was his name? Yeah, Jeffrey Dahmer. I mean, you still had religious people saying, this guy's evil. Look, he's 20 years old. A male jogger runs by. He not only attacks them, he not only rapes them, he then eats them. Does it dawn on anybody that maybe he has a mental illness? I doubt he's sitting there, praying to Satan or something. When you attack male joggers, rape them, and eat them, I imagine something's wrong with your brain, okay? I've never had the urge to do any of those 3. And if you do, you should call Charter Hospital and tell them that you're having urges to attack, rape, and eat male joggers. Same thing with asthma. You see it in your family. You have all these kids. They all came out of the same mom, same dad. And you got one kid waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning and can't breathe? I mean, come on, but you've got money for Nikes and Garth Brooks CDs and going to the Phoenix Suns, and you get HBO, and you got power windows because you're so damn lazy you can't even roll up your window. And now you're saying that when your child has asthma, that's an expense, and we shouldn't be spending millions, if not billions of dollars a year trying to figure out how to cure this thing? My God, it lost 10 million lost school days a year, according to Regina Hertzlinger, and cost $6.2 billion. Well, if something costs you $6.2 billion a year, don't you think it's worth $1 billion of investment from Merck and Pfizer, Free Enterprise Pharmaceuticals traded on the New York Stock Exchange, to go chase down a cure? Because if they had a pill for $5 billion that could cure this thing that costs $6.2 billion, America would save $1.2 billion that they could go spend watching movies like the Titanic. So just think about this industry as you want it to grow. You want to solve these 9 diseases. Look at diabetes. It affects 6 million Americans, and it's 15% of the healthcare budget. 13 million Americans suffer from asthma. Come on, we got to solve these things. So what's happening macroeconomically as far as difference between doctors, dentists, and lawyers? Well, number one, going back to 1955, you graduated about 8,000 lawyers a year. That has skyrocketed to, gosh darn, 38,000. You have a 4-fold increase in lawyers. Physicians were about 7,500. It doubled to 15,000. So you have a 2-fold increase in physicians. Dentistry started about 1955 with about 3,500, grew to about 6,500. It's back down to 3,500. Here we are, the United States, every year, after you count up people who immigrated and were born, subtracting everybody who died or moved out of the country, we have a net increase of between 2.3 and 2.6 million new people every year. So you add a Phoenix metro every year in this country, okay? And you've done that for the last 30 years, and what do? You crank out less dentists in 1995 than you did in 1955. That is why dentists are experiencing a boom. You got a physician for every 529 people. You got one specialist for every 819 people. And you got a dentist for every 1,850 people? Why do you have a physician for every 529 people and only one dentist for every 1,850 people? When people talk about what about the rising cost, the number rising of people without health insurance, that's because doctors are not doing market segmentation. When you got all the doctors making a Cadillac and no one wants to go make a Ford Escort, that is the only reason why health insurance is unaffordable, because you got 95% of all the doctors and dentists chasing the top 5% wealth of America. And the number one problem with healthcare in the United States is that basically you have no market segmentation. Everybody's trying to make a Cadillac or a Buick. No one will go in downtown and just open up a dental clinic where they just pull teeth, do silver fillings, and make dentures and partials. And if you did that in every aspect of healthcare, where you had maybe one hospital that just does basic healthcare, and they could sell insurance, make it cheap. They don't do cardiac catheterizations. They don't do heart, lung, and liver transplants. They just do basic healthcare. And if the government, if the state boards would say, well, are you a dental office, a medical office, or are you a dental clinic or a medical clinic, and have 2 sets of statutes. These are the laws, and this is the standard of care for a hospital office. This is the laws and the rules with more expanded function and more leeway for hospital clinics. Maybe in a hospital you couldn't draw blood unless you're a phlebotomist, or clean teeth unless you're a hygienist. But in a dental clinic or a medical clinic, if the nurse's assistant, if the doctor gave her permission to go draw blood, she could do it without being a phlebotomist. If the dentist gave Jill the permission to clean teeth because he trained her as an apprenticeship to clean teeth, she could clean teeth without being a dental hygienist. Until you implement market segmentation, you will always have 43.4 million as of 1997 who don't have health insurance. And the reason they don't is because it's not affordable, because you don't have market segmentation. And as you sit there and look at prices, prices transmit information, they allow economics incentives, they distribute income. And price, the transmission of information, is when you say something costs 40,000 units and it's a BMW, and this costs 10,000 units and it's a Ford Escort, the price transmits a lot of information about what they're actually buying. And it also, when you go to make a product, are you making a car for 40,000? Because remember, you're going to take the price that's going to sell in the market, subtract the profit you need to stay in business, which equals your budget, as opposed to what dentists do. They just take their cost add on their profit, then arrive at a price that maybe is out of reach for 43 million people. So, you're not supposed to do price, you're not supposed to do cost plus profit equals price. You're supposed to take price that sells per your market segment minus the profit you need to stay in business equal your budget. I go to Taco Bell, I give them $1, they give me 2 tacos, I'm happy. I go to sit down Mexican restaurant, order 2 tacos, it's $7. Well, the reason 43 million people can't afford Mexican food is because there's no Taco Bells in healthcare. It's market segmentation. And with the new world order economy, which is a boundaryless economy, worldwide labor markets pushing down union labor, instantly linked information on the internet, and resilient, healthy companies, IPOs coming out of nowhere. They're biting into major countries like major Fortune 500 companies. Their major enemy is some startup being run by some 35-year-old punk rocker in his garage listening to the Grateful Dead. And if we're going to move forward, the theory of comparative advantage is that if I voluntarily trade, it's mutually beneficial. If I go to Taco Bell voluntarily and I give $1 for 2 tacos, that's quality tacos. If I have $7 and I want to go sit down at a Mexican restaurant, that's voluntary. That's mutually beneficial. That's comparative advantage. That's what all the economists were talking about going back to Adam Smith. The problem in healthcare, no market segmentation, and this guilt feeling. It's a Judeo-Christian Islamic. The 3 great monotheistic religions started with Judaism, Christianity to Islam. They're guilt-ridden, and you have all these doctors walking around feeling guilty that healthcare costs too much. When you look at the top 5 killer viruses which have plagued mankind: HIV, smallpox, polio, measles, whooping cough. You've knocked out 4 out of 5, and I'll bet you today, as sure as I'm standing here, 2010, they'll knock out HIV. Look at the recommended childhood immunizations. Your child goes in the hospital before the pediatric physician, before he's 2 years old, he's been immunized for diphtheria, tetanus, hepatitis B, pertussis, whooping cough, polio, meningitis, measles, mumps, rubella, and the new chickenpox Varivax vaccine. You should be proud of that. And I'm a hell of a lot more prouder of those 2 bacterial immunizations and those 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 virus immunizations than I am getting a rock from the stupid moon for $1 trillion. And so if you would just get an attitude shift, and if you would just feel good about what you're doing, and what you need to start doing is you need to start talking to your staff. If you sit there and you have staff members who think that in 1940, when 47 per 1,000 live births died, and now in 1995 it's down to 7.6 births per 1,000 from 1940 to 1995. If you think going from 47 dead births per 1,000 to 7.6 on your infant mortality rate is a bad deal, then you're not working in my office. If someone comes up to the counter and they say, well, I need a root canal to save my tooth, and you know that 27 out of 100 Americans at age 65 don't have a tooth in their head, and here's some 40-year-old with power windows, he's got Taco Bell stuck in his teeth, wearing Nikes and a gold chain, and your receptionist says, well, gosh, I'm sorry, I know that root canal is really expensive. If that's the way you feel, get the hell out of my office. If you don't feel like, you're a lucky son of a gun. Your grandma, you know what she's got to eat? She's got a big ball of plastic in her mouth. She can't eat chicken. She doesn't bite into a cheeseburger. It hurts when she eats. She gets stuff caught up under her denture, and you are buying a luxury, no different than a pair of Nikes or a gold watch. In the United States in 1920, 17 out of every 100,000 people died of syphilis. In 1980, it's only 1 out of 100,000. Probably half your staff wouldn't even be here if it was 1920. They would have died of syphilis. So we sit there, leading cause of death. 1990, it was pneumonia and influenza number 1, TB number 2, diarrhea number 3. Now it's heart disease, cancer, and cerebral vascular disease. And America is just rocking and rolling. So what we need to do is, the main thing I want to tell you on macroeconomics is, congratulations, doctor, from going from 4% of the economy to, gosh darn, 14% of the economy. Congratulations, dentist, for employing 650,000 employees in the United States who, if you fired them all tomorrow, would simply go work for a CD factory or a movie theater or a Mexican food, Chinese food, grocery store, entertainment sector. Congratulations on curing 4 out of the top 5 diseases. Congratulations on 2 bacterial immunizations and 8 viruses. And congratulations, keep up the good work. And if we're not economically number 1 and we're not making a lot of money doing it, then the children that are going to college today, if they go to college and they say, well, there's no money in healthcare, doctors don't make a dime, all the money's in law, and all of my 4 boys, if they see economic incentives, from prices, economic incentives, distribution of income, if they think all the money's in law and brokerage and Merrill Lynch and trading, these are the industries that don't make any goods, they don't make any food, they don't cure your babies, they don't fix your teeth. These are parasites on the existing economy. If they don't go to college and see 8 years of college, I'm a doctor, I make big bucks, and I save people's teeth and lives, I'm going there, then America is not going to attract its brightest to healthcare, which it has done for the last 50 years. The colleges have always attracted the brightest people in the healthcare, and we need to continue that trend for the next 10,000 years. Thank you very, very much for day one.